those logos, all of those organizations provided material help in 2023 that helped us get our work done. So we're really grateful to them. An example would be Puget Sound Energy last year provided us with some trees to replace trees that were under power lines that were a problem. And they actually helped us with that project, and we replaced a bunch of trees that way at no cost to the city. So we do rely on partners. In terms of the scope and scale of what we maintain, you can see there we've got 45 stormwater detention ponds, over 3,200 catch basins. On the tree side, we've got 10,000 street and park trees and about 2 square miles of open space. So significant assets that we maintain. We recertified for the 14th time last year as a Tree City USA. 2 new things. We got our 10th consecutive growth award. And that growth award means that we went above and beyond the regular standards to meet the certification. And because we've received 10 growth awards for 10 consecutive years, we were named by the Arbor Day Foundation as a Sterling community. And so that again reflects commitment over a number of years. This is difficult to see, but we wanted to give you a sense of the scope and scale of where we go and the work we do. So on the attached map, you can see a whole bunch of highlighted lines, and they basically reflect where Phil's team, where volunteers, and where contractors worked in 2023. And so we worked all over the city, downtown, and on the ridge. And the theme of last year was definitely stormwater maintenance and getting caught up on that. So wanted to mention that we had our 3rd successful project to replace street trees on Snoqualmie Ridge. The photo that you see there was what we found in December of 2022, but it wasn't just one tree. Multiple trees on Autumn Avenue blew over. Dispatch was calling us and they were saying, there's a tree down on Autumn Avenue. And then we would go and clear the tree. And then about 10 minutes later, dispatch would call again and say, there's a tree down on Autumn Avenue. And I'd say, are you sure? We were just there. And they, yeah, there's another tree down. And we would go, and the tree next to the one that we just cleared fell down. So the timing worked out because we planned to do this project in 2023. And in 2022, the street lost many trees. So it was good timing. The image on the bottom left shows the amount of work that we did, which is over 1,200 cubic yards of excavation to install good soils and prevent some of the problems that we'd seen in the past. So preventing infrastructure conflicts such as sidewalk panel displacement and giving the roots somewhere to go, improving the health of the trees and so on. So successful project, 3rd year in a row. But the stormwater maintenance, that was the big item to tackle in 23. And so there's a series of before and after pictures that you can see. And you might not recognize the before and after because they're quite different. This is Woody Creek Pond. We dug out the sediments, the contaminated sediments in Woody Creek last year. And that was a significant part of our summer because it was 6 ponds. The vault on the top there has like tons of plastic. We've got nanoplastics, microplastics, macroplastics, every kind of plastic you can imagine. And they're caught up in that vault. The main culprit was the small darts that children fire at each other. There was about 100 of those in there, plus, you know, every other kind of plastic and stuff that you don't want in your water, you don't want in the Snoqualmie River. That's just an example of the work that we do. And then the swale below is a bioswale. It has a treatment function for stormwater, and it doesn't function as well when it's completely overgrown, where there isn't a clear path for the water. So we did a lot of that work as well.
So wait, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So if the swale is, so the point of the swale is that the water can freely go down and contaminants can dissipate along the way rather
That's
than
right.
pooling.
Yeah.
And the overgrowth causes pooling?
The overgrowth can cause the water to divert places we don't want it to go. And so it can just impede that performance of the swale. Yeah. So moving on, Green Snoqualmie Partnership, a good year last year. We're getting back up to our pre-pandemic volunteer hours, 893. Lots of activity last year. And so I'll draw your attention to the partner funding. The partner funding was provided by organizations such as the Snoqualmie Tribe, Mounts to Sound Greenway Trust, King Conservation District. And so again, a lot of help in getting our work done. This is scratching the surface of what we have. We've got 52 acres in restoration, but we have another 1,098 to go. So this is just an ongoing work that we have. Wanted to show you some pictures of the people who came and helped us. So the top two pictures are from Green Snoqualmie Day in October last year. And then the bottom two are actually from special events, organizations that we reached out to or contacted us and said, can we help? So Z-Tech was an example of that, the business on Snoqualmie Ridge. They dedicate 8 hours of every employee's time to a local cause every year. And they picked us because they have an environmental bent. So that was the employees of Z-Tech at the bottom there. And then above that is an entire class of Wilderness Awareness School, a nonprofit in Duval, and there's about 40 people who are in their adult college level program, came and did some restoration for us at Three Forks. So we did have a lot of fun with, volunteers, residents, and groups last year, again, that helped us do our work. Trail system maintenance, a big focus in 23. A lot of things needed attention. So this included a total boardwalk replacement on the Stellar Trail, included 2 bridge deck replacements, and you can see there some of the before and after pictures. That project is ongoing and shortly to wrap up with a bridge replacement this May, and then everything will be maintained at or above the standards that were set. When the phone rings, we pick up the phone, and we don't just pick up the phone and dismiss people's concerns. We answer them. We go out. We do inspections. If there's an issue, we try and fix the issue. And so in 23, we had 323 requests come in from residents and so on, and we managed to resolve 318 of those. So the breakdown there, some big themes are storm. It was a stormy year, so a lot of those were storm response requests. And then a lot of them were, come and look at this tree, there's something wrong with it, or we think there's something wrong with it, tell us what you think. And then just to conclude, I want to say thank you to the committee, and I'll thank the council next week for investing in the program. So 2 staff were added to form this division. What we hope is that you're pleased with the work that we've done in 2023, and we want to assure you that we're making best efforts and we're involving as many people as we can in this work. So thank you for your support, and up for any questions.
Good report. Phil, you also manage the court-appointed volunteer program. You want to give some stats on that?
Yeah, so we had the Department of Corrections out in 2023 multiple times a week, at least twice a week for the duration of 2023. And a key, I'll actually go back and I'll show you a key statistic there. So pond fence repairs, in 2023, we replaced 224 posts and 19,000 linear feet, or 3.64 miles of rails. That wasn't me, thankfully. That was our help, the help we received from the Department of Corrections crews. That project on that scale without their help would be very difficult and very expensive if done by city staff. So we appreciated their help because certainly every fence out there was in disarray at the start of 2023. Every single fence is fixed as of today. So that was a big part of it.
And did you feel that there were any difficulties in using comic labor? Anything associated with that you were concerned about?
In 2023, we did not have any issues. We had good feedback actually from a lot of residents who said they appreciated the program and the work that was getting done. I mean, I think people could see, right? They could see the work that was being done and they appreciated it, because for some time prior, things like those fences had been raised by residents, but we hadn't been able to act quickly enough, fully enough, and so on. So we did not have issues in 2023 with that program at all. Nothing but positive from my standpoint.
That's good to know.
Just a comment. Yeah, I've had them working around my house through the railroad park and as well as the downtown parks and stuff. And they've always been pleasant and respectful and, you know, very, I think most of them are hardworking, but no, they do a great job.
Yeah, that's been our experience too. If we do work in parks, we'll typically shut the park down, so we just don't have conflict with other users. But you know, typically we're not working in the parks, so we're out, you know, in the forested areas, the stormwater ponds, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see also the Orchard Street Bridge was repaired. Last time I was down there was when the horse was in it. I don't think the bridges were meant to be for horses on them at this stage of the game, so.
Is the replacement bridge capable of supporting a horse?
Yes,
Is it meant to?
that's a good question. I would have to look at that, but the structural members on that bridge are very strong. They're overbuilt, certainly for people, and they should be able to take the weight of a horse.
Okay. All right. Anything else? I did have one question. The work that you guys did on Autumn is just incredible. The prep for putting in those new trees. You know, seeing the pictures and hearing about the process, I have no concern that we're going to have a repeat of December 22 on Autumn. And I know that that's a very involved process, and we have a schedule that spans out for a couple of decades for tree replacement and doing it properly. And I'm sure you've been privy to some of the communications from citizens about frustration.
Yes.
And do you have any thoughts on things that citizens could do in those planting areas, or if that would be something that we could figure out? I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's actually a 118-year replacement schedule as things stand. I don't think that is any kind of neglect from the city. It's just an expensive process, and you know, it's just a long timeline to get the work done, mainly because of the expense of the soil work. Now, I've decided, and I've talked with staff and I've talked with the engineers about taking another hard look at how we do that this year. So we make improvements, right? So we don't just follow the same process blindly, but we examine the process and we decide, can we do better? I think we can. I think there's some ways to reduce that timeline without adding cost. And so that's what we're exploring this year. And we're actually going to take a second run at how we scored streets, what we think is the priority, because in the 7 years since I did the initial score, so much has changed. We've had storms, we've had tree diseases, we've had, you know, stuff change. And so we're going to take a look at that. So that's a partial answer. And to round out the answer, there was a particular customer on the ridge who was waiting for a tree to be replaced. It was quite a long ways out. The answer that we landed on was, we're going to basically install a temporary tree. Now, what this means is we're going to not do the extensive soil preparation and work. We're going to do minimal and get a tree growing in that location. Ultimately, in some decades, when we revisit, that tree will have to be removed, and then we'll do something like you saw in Autumn. But it does serve that function. It gets that resident some shade, it gets them a tree, and it's not a huge cost to the city. The cost to the city is the site work and soil work. It's not really the tree itself.
I love that answer.
Okay.
I love that answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question. Was there, I know that the soil wasn't good to start with when the ridge was built out. But did you end up having to change the type of tree to enable something to be, you know, better accommodate to those conditions, even with the soil improvement?
That's a really good question. So if there's good soil, almost any tree will grow well and not cause the same type of infrastructure conflicts. However, we're aware of certain issues with certain species just from experience in Snoqualmie. There are things we're moving away from. There are things we're not planting anymore. Maples, for instance, we have too many maples. Every city does, but it's a threat when you have too much of one kind of tree. Because then if something comes along that damages that, or a disease or so on, you lose a huge portion of your population. So we've made big strides with diversity. We've added several species that were not in Snoqualmie. We have chosen to plant trees that ultimately don't get to huge stature because we know the site can't accommodate it, even with the soils. So that's another area where we're constantly kind of tweaking. Okay, we think this is the right fit. Maybe this one isn't. So yeah, a lot of consideration goes into that question.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for that report.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Next on our list is AB 24-046 Task Order 38 Amendment with Northwest Hydraulic Consultants. This sounds like a Dillon one, for Sandy Cove Bank Stabilization. It is a Dillon one? All right. Okay.
Join as a panelist and then my presentation, or not my presentation, but walk through the agenda. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Hello everyone, I'm Dylan Gamble, the CIP manager with the Public Works Department. It's nice to see you this evening. I'm here to present the agenda bill that is AB 24046, which is a amendment to Task Order 38, which is a on-call contract with NHC. I call them, but Northwest Hydraulic Consultants. So that's a mouthful. I'm going to call them NHC going forward. It gets a little cumbersome to keep going with their full name. A couple of details before I kind of dive into the history of this contract. One, you're going to see that I have the amendment broken into 1.2 and 1.3. And that's a bit unusual in terms of how we've maybe approached some task ordering before. Confirmed with our legal department, this is a okay way of going about it. And I can get into the details of why I did this, but I did it to help kind of clarify how we got to this point. So some of the background on this project as a whole, as you know, likely that this is related to the Sandy Cove Bank Stabilization effort. The project started back in around 2019. We had contracted with NHC at that time to initiate designs, work through permitting. Lots of chaos has happened between 2019 and 2023 when we got through phase 1 of construction. Included in that was an additional amendment to their contract back in 2022, which both extended the duration of the contract as well as adding additional scope and funding. So we are talking about an addition to that amendment. So that's why it's 1.2, 1.3. If you can think about it as a original contract, amendment 1.1, which is not what it's called, would have happened in 2022. I'm suggesting here with this agenda bill 1.2 and 1.3. So it's a bit confusing there. I want to kind of explain some of how we got here and what's going on with some of this contracting, because it can be a little bit to break down. With on-call contracts and the task order structure that we had both in 2019 all the way through 2022, there's work efforts that went into the task orders that were beyond simply Sandy Cove efforts. So there was something like $94,000 of scope done in the first original contract for reach-wide analysis to figure out exactly what the impacts are from the weir modifications back in 2015, how that scour and impacts are affecting the reach, not just Sandy Cove Park. So there's work that had broader implications. There's also Clomar research, which is related to how FEMA, where they put our 100-year flood plain. So they draw it on a map, and we can make request to modify where they put that with CLOMARS or LOMARS. It's an acronym and I don't remember what it stands for exactly, but it's essentially how they plot that and what that, and that has a lot of implications both for this project as well as a bunch of other things that happen riverfront adjacent. And so a lot of impacts there. So that's all to say that this amendment has a lot of baggage in that it has other works attached to some of the contracts. The last thing I want to mention is that the difficulty in permitting, the duration of permitting, the re-review, new alternative analyses that we had to go through. We had to redact our initial nationwide permit application with the Army Corps, and we had to go with an individual permit. And what that means is essentially a much more rigorous review. And that has really put us back. And this kind of determination happened right around 2022 when that original scope came through. The other addition that has added to the complexity of the scope and our work with NHC, I'm sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, on that line, my question was with reading through all the documents is that with the Army Corps of Engineers, it looked like there was multiple project managers, and did that slow down the process with everything that they were trying to do or not do with personnel constantly changing and permitting and such?
Yes, very yes. It was a lot for quite a long time. Especially kind of when COVID first hit, we had one project manager and they would be really quick to get back to us. And then all of a sudden they were either getting a promotion or they're switching departments, and they would give us an email to their next person. And we would be trying to get in touch with our friends who know people at the Army Corps to try to help us dial in on where this person is and why they're not getting back to us on our permit. And the trick about this is that there's only so much time, and there's a window of construction for the river. And there's kind of timing for those nationwide permits. And not getting feedback from the Army Corps really put us behind, years, in fact. And the process of working through different project managers with different expectations of our project, as well as how they interacted with both Department of Ecology, Fish and Wildlife, different tribal recognitions, ourselves, our own consultant team, it really muddied the water and made it a much more difficult process.
Did it literally muddy the water though? No.
We have turbidity monitoring for that. Everything is, we met those numbers.
So I get scared when we talk about delays on this because
Yeah.
Snoqualmie was disappearing into the river for a while there. I have this first stage that we did to shore up. Is it holding? Is it doing its job properly, or are these delays going to harm that?
The impacts to what was brought up here, the delays of the Army Corps, we already saw it. By the time we did the construction last summer, the delays had already caused that degradation. So that almost nearly 15 feet on the far left bank from my perspective now,
Right.
which is where most of the erosion was happening. That had already occurred by the time we got to construction. Since we have installed, everything has been fine, but we did not get a really intense flooding season. So we didn't have numbers exceeding, 65,000 CFS or something like that, which is great because now we have a facility that we can move forward with without any sort of major revisions to what actually exists there. It seems to be going pretty well. In
And have
fact,
you-
it even collected some logs and things, which is a good example of how it's holding.
Have you consulted the Farmer's Almanac? Are we looking good in the next couple of years for?
I
These
have no
next
idea. Jeff always likes to say that the river is very cyclical, and this I think is very true. And part of that is that it's cyclical and that something's always happening, but big things and small things happen, and it's a little bit difficult to predict. We know that things will happen, but not what year. So
Okay.
over the next 20 years, we know this is a likely outcome, but not that 1 year's heavy rain event will actually cause it. There's kind of a lot of
Law of large numbers.
well, there's
kind
just
of
some
stuff, yeah.
interesting nuances with water hydrology that mean the scour does not react the way I might intuitively think it does. I like to think that quickly thinking about rivers is that when the water goes really high, that must mean there's a lot of stuff pushing it out. And that's not necessarily the case. Water speed and the amount of water, they don't necessarily correlate to erosion in the same way that you might instinctually think about. So there's a lot of factors that go on there. And that's why we had to go through all the modeling that we did to try to show that the project we put in would withstand the test of time. With best science and knowing that this whole project type is kind of evolving over the last 20, 30 years. And we've seen a lot of good growth there. Took us on a bit of a tangent there, but
Oh, that was helpful.
yeah.
Sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
no problem. Let's see. Getting on to, I have no idea where I was, to be honest, but I was
Cat's fault.
kind of going through some of the past contracts, and I just wanted to reiterate that some work was done that wasn't just Sandy Cove. But if you were to tally all of the past contracts, the original contract, the amendment, and what I'm proposing here, it does get to a steeper number than I think we would want to see. 1,441,541. That's the number I have here. That would be the total if approved. The two contract amendments that I suggested. That is a steep level of design. That is, however, representative of the complexity of the project and the difficulties of it. And I kind of want to jump into the rationale of why I put 1.2 and 1.3. And this came as a way of me controlling consultant times and energies. So the consultant, when we were getting close to running out of our existing scope of funding, they proposed a new contract amendment that had, this is what we think it would take to get the work done, right? As you would expect. The number was too scary for me, and I had a lot of frustrations with it. And so I had to do a lot of modifications, both to what they're going to be doing and when. And I divided this to try to showcase final design, bid, and construction management, but from the design point of view, and construction management as in a part of the actual construction phase. So 1.2 is the NHC component of final design, getting us from 60%, which is required for permitting, all the way up to 100%. Bids in those bid packages, answering questions to all the construction companies are going to ask us to refine details, then to answer all the RFIs or the request for informations, tell me how the heck you actually intend to do this. I see it in your designs, but it doesn't make any sense now that I'm here with the truck, kind of thing. And then the 1.3 is to hire a project management company. In this case, it's KPFF, I believe, to do on-site construction management, given the complexity of the project. This would have someone on-site doing actual construction management throughout the course of the project. And so I divided it because in a lot of ways, we package construction management with construction rather than a design focus. So I divided it to kind of showcase, in a lot of ways, we're kind of stepping towards construction with this contract amendment, not simply more and more design money being thrown at new alternative analysis, though that will be required a bit to meet the final designs. I'm happy to go into how I worked with the consultant to refine the number down. I could tell you the numbers that they originally gave me. I could break down some of the refinements that I gave to them. It's a lot. We had lots of meetings. We have a weekly meeting to kind of go over stuff, and the last few months have been devoted to kind of refining the scope. It's a two-parter from my side as the city side. And it's to make sure that we can do the job with the scope, and then I'm not coming back here last minute for $40,000 or some number like that, just to get this thing right over the edge when we're so close. Given that it's budget season and a couple other things going on, it's going to be busy, and to bring something last minute like that's very frustrating. It is, of course, yeah.
Oh, finish your train of thought, please.
So, and then so I want to complete the project, and I also want to make sure that we're not padding any budgets that shouldn't be padded. I don't want to just let them have kind of unleashed tether. So it's an effort to bring us as close to my comfort level as possible. That's the effort there.
So in reading over the, some of the specifics of, like you were saying, when certain things were submitted to you, like it seemed like the kind of highlights were 30%, 60%, 90%.
Yeah.
So were those all at certain permitting times that goal had to be reached, instead of like, why don't they just turn over all the plans to you at once, type of a thing? Or
Yeah, no. This kind of gets into the approach that we're going to take with a project like this, I keep wanting to say the word muddy, but I'm going to avoid it. It gets a little more complicated with something like this. We typically in engineering will see these numbers, 10%, 30%, 60, 90, and 100. Those are kind of big markers to indicate milestones, so to speak, in the design process. So at 10%, we're really kind of looking at feasibility. What might the layout be? What kind of conditions exist? We might have some reports, we might have some data to back up those things, but it's pretty minimal. At 30%, we're really trying to get those refined. We're going to have geotech surveys that are going to back up these decision-making. We're going to have some hydraulic stuff in this case. That's where 30% is going to be kind of trying to coalesce data to the design. It's where the design kind of gets built from. And that 60% is usually the bare minimum that most granting agencies will require us to submit our concept to them at. This is especially true in transportation projects. They require 60% designs to be able to apply. And that's essentially a level of commitment. It's not just like a sketch pad idea of like, I think we're going to do this cool thing here. This is what it's going to look like. I have no concerns it'll get constructed. 60% is a confidence level to show that we put in a lot of work to show that it's feasible. This is starting to get to how much we think it's going to cost pretty confidently. And these are some of the pitfalls, hurdles, and permits that we're going to need to get. Between 60 and 90 is we're now getting permits. They're going to tell us that we either meet or do not meet their permits. We might have to adjust our designs to kind of feed in their feedback, a bunch of other things like that. And then between 90 and 100 is really getting to something that we could start to take out to construction and build. That's really in that final step. So I explained all that to say we got from somewhere between 0 and 30 a bunch of times because of the process of working with the Army Corps and having new alternatives analysis requested of us, which means we have to look at feasibility of lots of different concepts. And so we're with permitting in this way, we can kind of sometimes get back down, get ourselves knocked down, back lower in our percentages. But that kind of means that we've feasibility tested a lot of alternatives. We've gotten to 10% or 30% with a bunch of ideas. In a lot of other projects, we kind of just will go right through. This one, the permitting, the complexity of the project, and the fact that we want to do it right and construct it within a really limited time window, all kind of create complication here. I hope that gets roughly there.
So with this kind of second phase, the second scope, is are you having to repeat a lot of things, or is it like I saw in there that they have like an archaeological survey? Was that not done in the first phase, or are we repeating something that's already been done with the first phase of?
To some extent, we do have to do some updating. We did conduct a cultural resources assessment of the site and some surrounding areas according to whatever scope we originally had contracted. Luckily, we're kind of in the same area, so that cultural resource assessment will be there. However, the law will change with regards to what requirements we're obligated to follow. And we have, if we change our scope, that could impact how the report's accuracy. So right now, we're not seeing that we have to go out and get a whole new report, but we do have to make sure that our report is compliant with new state law, and that it is reflective of the scope that we have, because if it does not match up, then the permitting agencies will say, it seems like you're using a report that doesn't reflect the project you're actually talking about, which does happen. So that's the kind of work we're doing now. We're not starting from scratch, but we do have to go back through and kind of review a lot of our foundations.
Can we go to the budget section?
Yes. Budget section of this AB, right?
Budget impacts
Okay.
overall. So for the biennial 2023, we had $3.6 million so far. We've about 935 committed, leaving us a current budget before this amendment of $2,682,000. What are the items? I assume there's we budgeted that and we had planned to spend that. What are the other items beyond this amendment that go into that 268?
To go into the 268 of, let me track with you.
The current available budget, two point
The
six eight.
2,682,000, yeah, so we have, essentially what's remaining is construction of the final design after this amendment would be all that remains. Assuming there's no additional costs that come with construction, but yeah, that's the only thing remaining after this budget amendment.
Okay, what's the estimate on what that construction will cost?
Yeah, right now, this is, again, 60% design, so we have some opportunity for some discussion, and I also believe that these cost estimates are a bit higher than I actually anticipate, but I'm gonna use the engineer's estimates here. Construction cost is at 2,445,608. And then they include some contingency on top of that, but I pulled it out for sake of this conversation. Sales tax in this case would be about $250,000. So adding those two together, you get 265. And so,
2.65.
2,650,000.
Okay, so with estimated construction costs and with this amendment, your estimate is you will be over budget.
Exactly. And there,
Where does that say that in here?
it doesn't, Jen, if you want to come in, it doesn't say that in here. However, this, I do know this is coming. And I have been thinking of once I actually know what the bid costs come in at. I have the engineer's estimate, which are telling me we're looking to go over. I have other stormwater projects that we might consider swapping the budgetary years for, and a couple other things. And I, in a sense, didn't want to overburden this, but I definitely want to discuss it. I was not going to let this go. I do know that we're very close to budget on this. I'm hoping that the bids come in lower, and I have been identifying options in the stormwater utility, which is where this project is funded from, to kind of backfill. In addition to that, we went for grant funding last year, and we received an additional $200,000 from King County Flood Control District for the project. So I'm trying to shrink it on both paths.
Is that 200,000 reflected in here yet? Or
No, because if you look at the 5,919,364, that assumes grant money is in there to some extent. And so I have been looking at what the city's contributions are, the actual grant money that we really received, the expected remaining amount of funding for the project, and trying to see how close we can get. And that's why I'm really looking at the value engineering of some of the engineering costs and some things like that.
why are you, I don't want to say confident, why are you hopeful that that the bids are going to come in lower?
Yeah, I'd give it a confidence rating. So I am of some level of confidence, and there's other experts in the room that kind of weigh in on this. But my feeling at this moment is that we're seeing, I've already gotten several phone calls from contractors asking me, hey, I saw phase 1 go through. I know there's a phase 2, talking to Rodarte, who's a construction company that we hired. When are you going to open this bid? And it tends to correlate that if I'm getting a lot of excitement or interest before I've even issued a bid, that there are some companies that are very eager to get onto a project like this. And we did not get bad bids with the first phase. And I feel that the climate for construction costs right now is kind of inching its way even more affordable. This isn't a road project. So in a sense, there's not a very refined toolkit for these construction companies to price things, right? It's not just about tonnage and things like that. This is a bit more of a complicated project in that it's in water work. They have to have specialty equipment and some other things. And so
That makes me less confident. Why does that make you more confident?
because some companies already own things. So we will get a weird variety of bids from companies who will rent all of their equipment versus companies that already have this expertise on hand, and they're going to be taking it from one job to the next one. So they're already going to be kind of front loading a lot of this mobilization costs into their own workforce. And they don't want to pivot to a totally different industry at that time. I'm seeing that happen a bit as especially some King County projects are going on near us. So I'm expecting that we're going to get another company that's working in projects near us, trying to tail their project to ours, or to link them, their crews, their scheduling, something like that.
But you can understand why Councilman
you're-
Holloway is concerned, because he's not confident about anything ever.
There's a wonderful book called Hope is Not a Method.
Hope is not a strategy.
No, Hope is Not a Method, written by the Apollo 13 flight director. Okay, and in this case, hope is not a method. So what I'm really itching at is, guys, you didn't come forward with me. You're asking me to make a commitment on 20% of this overall budget without telling me the other 80% that in your own estimate is going over. So you've got an issue, you've got a risk. Conversation then goes from there of how do I mitigate that risk and issue and still make this a viable path forward. That's not here in the material. I had to prompt to get it. So in essence, you've brought forward partial information for me to make a commitment on that would have led me to unknowingly overcommit on this project without knowing the rest of it. And guys, I need all the data. Okay, so I'm concerned that occurred. Okay, so I need on these projects, when you come forward, I need to know what is committed and done, and what the term is estimate at completion. What's your EAC? Okay, and is that over or below the budget? And how are we mitigating? Or do we need to make a change? Swap things around and do something. But need to have that conversation in the context of making this approval, because this is just one step to approving something that we think will be over budget. And I have reluctance to do that. Also,
When are you planning to put things out for bid? I mean, what's the anticipated timeframe?
Right now, our construction window, or our fish window, is July 1st through October 24th. And we are hoping to kind of give the contractor as much time to construct in that window as possible. Right now, it's looking like we're hoping to have the contractor's agreement settled somewhere in early July. And that means we would be going to bid in late May, early to mid-June. I'm hoping to have a 30-day bid window, so we can kind of work backwards 30 days. And then there's the council approval process, which takes 2 weeks plus. So soon. Late May, early June is my anticipation. And that's really when I'll actually know costs. Engineers' estimates can be one thing, especially at 60%. But that's kind of when we will know for sure what our total cost of the project will be, is that moment. Plus this one, of course, the impacts goes both ways.
So is this additional to the current revetment that was done? Is this like adding on to this, building onto this, and then doing things for the park itself too? Or what's the additional scope that we might have room to play with?
This is kind of what we did last summer was we did the root canal procedure and we put a temporary crown on. What we're talking about is putting the golden cap onto it now. The finished product, the one that actually does a lot of the hydraulic controls for the future and protection and armoring of the bank. Just like perfect dental analogy.
Could we do enamel instead of gold?
Right.
as long as you don't think about trees.
Pivoting us, yeah. He had his glory day. We're getting out of trees. And with that, there is some work that we will be doing that is park-ish, especially the habitat restorations that we're going to do kind of on the peripheral. The bank roughening, things of that nature will look very restoration focused. However, there is a separate CIP project to do the park features, which would go from kind of where we end the revetment stabilization project up to the right-of-way line at the top of the bank where people currently park in that gravel lot.
Mhm.
That is not part of the scope. And it is actually on the other side of the CIP. It's on the non-utility side.
But it will also cover the like the King Street overflow?
Yes, so
Outfall.
Outfall, excuse me.
Yeah, it's part of our stormwater.
Start with an O, yeah.
Yeah, and there's also a stairway feature which provides access to the river. We are doing some park amenities,
Yeah,
building that into this project.
okay. And this all is to be, so things come together with the river trail that, as far as, what some of these other things will work with that too.
Yeah, I would say that primary goal is make sure there's a place for a river trail to go, is what this project's doing. And then it is also adding some features that are going to be either really valuable or unique to the location that we happen to have here at Zinco. Stairways, bank armoring, a very good conifer set for putting in really good trees along the river, and bank roughening to try to match that habitat restoration goals that we see across the valley, up and down, both directions.
If I'm hearing my fellow councilman right, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think the idea is that we need to know how we're going to fund this if none of your hopes come true. So I'm not saying abandon all hope, but let's budget it like all hope is lost. And then maybe there are some of those projects that would be easily reincorporated into the budget if we were, say, to get $300,000 in grants or something along those lines. But I think Councilman Holloway's point that we need to make sure that this is properly funded before we go forward is a valid one. But I love that you're working on these other strategies to get it funded. So thank you for that.
Right, and I am being pretty specific to stormwater utility. That's where this project is funded. That's that outfall that in a lot of ways we're protecting with this project. That's the kind of group of projects that we're gonna look at. And I think we have some pretty ideal candidates, especially given the amount of funding that I'm a little nervous about. Until I know really good numbers, I almost don't know how much to try to account for, so to speak. I have a pretty good guess, but I'm refining it as we go.
Suggestions? I'm assuming you're going to say consent. I am going to disagree.
You want me to scroll
Yeah.
it all?
Say again.
You want me to move that, scroll it? Let me know.
Councilman Holloway, you got anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm done with that section now.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Did you have anything else, Mr. Gamble? Okay. Thank you very much. Non-consent?
Non-consent.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gamble. Moving on to discussion, community center expansion update.
Right. So I think last time we left off, we were quite a ways, we had quite a gap in our funding to build the community center in the full design that we were hoping to build. We understood from just comments from council and talking with all of you that, that was our goal. That was our intent, was to build it right. But given the gap, we are looking at alternative approaches. So what we have tasked our contractor with is to develop a phased approach to developing the construction or the community center expansion. So in order to get the price down, we ran through with the contractor all of the various options and treatments that we were going to implement in the development of the building. And we removed expensive items. We did a fair bit of value engineering to try to get the cost down. If we take the phased approach, and we think that would be our best bet, we can remove the dry side improvements, which would be the 2 fitness studios, and remove some other features from the design. There's a canopy, there is the walkway that comes up from Ridge Street, etc. Those things can be constructed at a later date, either under a separate phase 2 contract or perhaps in one-offs that we can do some of it ourselves or in small contracts over time. So if we do that and build just the pool facility, the community room, the new reception area, the new, I guess you call it our living room, or we're calling the living room, and then do some minor improvements to the existing building to add some more space, we are coming up with pricing now, which looks like we can maybe bridge that gap, which I can't give it to you just yet because we're still working on it. Or I want to confirm some things before I give you those numbers. But you will see us soon coming to you with real numbers and a proposal for moving forward. I think we want to give Drew a good cut at developing a funding strategy so that we can actually present you with the complete bit of information.
No? Okay. I'd encourage you to bring those thoughts to council as well. I think it's worth us taking a look at what you're suggesting. There is a point at which we can cut costs to the point that the project is something that we wouldn't want anyway. So it's one of the things that we heard a lot in the surveys was build it right. So I'd encourage you to share those plans with council as much as possible.
And we intend to.
Okay,
Right.
great. Number 5, anything else to add on the community center discussion for now? No. Number 5, it looks like we're taking down a home.
Right.
Is this the bathtub home?
Yeah, I guess you could call it that.
It's the hoarder home. It's the hoarder home.
Okay.
It is this home. As soon as that updates.
Oh, I was gonna say. That's
That home.
a
Very
big
good.
There's
property.
a lot of homes.
It's
The river? It's the white, it's the, yeah. that
like
one.
those waters were muddied.
Yeah, great Google Maps. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I just want to give a quick update on where we stand with the demolition of this property. We purchased it back in, I believe, January, early mid-January. And since then, we've been working on the demo permits and the requirements for that. We initiated that with a inspection report. The inspection report told us that there is a lot of lead in the white part of the paint.
What
And not an
fun.
insignificant amount of lead, a lot of lead. And
Wow.
the major component to that is that in order to demo it properly, we have to contain all the lead paint and send it to a remediation facility that is in Yakima, which is not cheap or close. The consequences of that are that the costs have gone up and also the complexity of the demo permit. The last steps that are kind of working their way through right now is locking off the PSC gas line. And then I have the bid for this project, the cost of demo that we used job order contracting to confirm. And I will be bringing that to the next Parks and Works Committee.
Concerns at all with this? Because I know that the lead's been in the paint there for decades.
Mhm.
Getting into the soil or eventually seeping into the stream and pond there that runs into the river.
That is why that's essentially why our removal process is going to be pretty complicated.
So they're gonna take all the soil around
They're
there.
going to lay plastic down around it by quite a ways. Every piece of lead paint has to go into plastic. All the employees have to wear Tyvek suits the entire time. It has to be contained in plastic bags, transported in a specialty vehicle.
And the soil.
And some amount of
Is-
soil is going to go with it as well. And it has to be also sent to that facility.
Yeah, you may get some leaching from the paint that gets in the soil, and I assume there'll be soil testing. And that soil that tests positive to certain levels will have to go through the remediation he's taking. But leaching is a much a smaller amount. The real concern is when you get to demolition, you're not fertilizing the ground with paint chips,
Right.
which would be a much worse issue. And so, yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, because I know they had so much debris around the house. I mean, it's cleaned up quite a bit.
Yeah, all man-made objects will be taken off the property.
Yeah.
With some extent, like we're going to leave the sewer main very close and there will be a bit of an overlap as we cap it, things like that. But bathtubs, for example, would be removed, tires, tractor tires, dog houses. Yeah, I've walked around the property. I've got a list of things and I will be out there when we're doing the wrap up to catch all the things that are nearby.
So I've been piling up the trash around there because there was trash
okay.
scattered. You know,
Just scattering around. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been consolidating it in certain areas around at the periphery of the property and stuff like that. But there's
There's a lot back there.
a lot of alcohol bottles back there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
All right.
But now I
Thank you.
think I won't do it anymore.
Fair gloves.
All right, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 seconds for staffing reports and project status.
Yeah, good news about staffing. We are nearly fully staffed at this point. In the last 2 weeks, we've been conducting interviews within our water and wastewater division. We have offered employment to 2 folks in wastewater and they both accepted. So we have 2 new wastewater employees, operators. These are level 1, so they're rookies, but they come with some good qualifications. So we think we found some good ones. Water, likewise, we have 2 new employees in water. One was a new hire, one was a transfer from our Parks division, who was a new employee to the Parks division. And so now we are fully staffed in water and we need 1 more for Parks. And we are conducting interviews, I think, next week for the.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. With that, we're out of time. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.